Hey everyone, thanks for joining me again. This is part 3 in a series of videos that make up a tutorial called Build a Website with Gatsby. And in this video what we're going to do is bring in some data in the form of a JSON object, and then we're going to transform it so that we can use GraphQL queries to add that data to our components. So if you take a look at your graphical interface, recall last time we added some site metadata and then we queried it in our header. And we used the static query hook. We got that metadata and we added the title to the heading, H1 heading on our header. All right, but this time, well, before we go any further with that, take a look at what you have available for querying. Again, last time we had the site query, and that gave us, site, and that gave us site metadata, which gave us the description of the site URL, and the title, which we created. We created these fields and gave them values. All right, but this time I said we want to deal with JSON files, and we don't have any queries for JSON files now. So we're going to add in a couple of plugins that we'll use to make it so that we can query some JSON files that we're also going to have to add at some point in this tutorial. But first, let's just look at a way that you're probably very used to using and bringing in JSON data into your projects. If you go to this GitHub gist, right, it's called demotivation.json. It's a JSON file. It's a simple JSON object. And if you hear some strange music in the background, that's just, I live here in Tokyo and they play this music at 5:30 to call the kids home. Reminds me of that movie The Time Machine by H.G. Wells. Maybe you're familiar with that one. But anyway, we've got this object here, and its first property is an array of quotes, and we have all of these different quotes with associated authors. Alright, so we can bring this into our project just by using the fetch API. So if we convert this to raw, and then we grab this URL, we go into our index.js file. Remember, this was the home page component, right? And our home page looked like this. Right, and here we can use fetch to bring in that data. So we'll use a couple of hooks to do that. So we'll use both state and effect. We'll add that URL we just copied to the clipboard. We'll create a state variable called quotes. And we'll just initialize it with an empty object. Alright, and then after the initial page render, we'll run use effect. And we only want it to run one time. Alright, so we'll create a function called getData, and we'll use async await. And just to make sure that we're bringing in the data, let's go ahead and take a look at our home page. All right, open up the console. All right. Don't see anything logged to the console yet. Just a second. Well, we should be logging that to the console. Oh, sorry. We have to invoke our getData function first. Alright, so back to the home page. Now we see that data object here, where it's an object with its primary property of quotes, which is an array of 9 quotes. Each quote corresponds to a data node that has an author and a quote. Okay, so now we could just add it to our home page component and have it display in the JSX that we have here. And I've already added this, so you didn't have to sit through and watch me do it. It's nothing special, so you wouldn't really benefit from watching it. So if you can add your own way of displaying data, using your own HTML and CSS stylings. All right, so the way it's set up now, it's not accessing the data in the right way. All right, so first we have to think about, actually, what I need to do first is I need to set state here. So we'll set quotes to data. All right. And actually, this should work. I think I have it set up correctly, right? It's the overall quotes object, which is this. And then its first property is an array of quotes, which is this. So we're saying here, if we have the array, then go ahead and map over that array, and for each quote, display both the author and the quote. And then if we don't have it, just display a message that says loading. All right, so if we go to our home page, we're getting those quotes displayed, and you can see why I didn't make you sit through watching me code up the HTML and CSS. All right, but we're not going to keep this, so don't worry about it. This is going to end up being a blog, and this right here, what we've done is just brought in some JSON data as a test. All right, but we might want to bring in the JSON data and then keep it in our project, write it to some JSON files, and then access those files and transform the data so that we can use GraphQL queries. And we'll be doing that actually in the next video with markdown files, but this time around we'll be doing it with JSON files. All right, so if you go into your code editor, you can comment this back out again. All right, we won't be using this. Well, you can leave it like that for now. All right, so for now, go into the root of your project and create a new folder called data. This is where our JSON data files are going to live. There's nothing in there right now, but we'll create a file that writes data to this folder in the form of JSON files. All right, so in your project root, you can create a new file. Call this index.js2 if you want. There shouldn't be any conflict since we're in a different folder than our other index.js here. All right, and then we're going to use fetch again to bring in that data, but this time, since we're on the node side of things, you'll need to actually add the node fetch package. I've already done that, so go ahead and pause the video and install it yourself, and when you're done, then we'll continue on. All right, so we need to require that in our project, or in our index.js file. We'll also be using fs, which should automatically be in your node package. This is for writing the files and reading them as well if you're going to. All right, and then from here, I can bring in the URL. We can use this as well. All right, we're not using React here. Let's just go ahead and console log the data. This time it'll appear in our terminal below. Make sure we're getting it in though. But to run this file, you could go into your package JSON file and write a script. I've written one here. I called my script server. You can call yours what you like, but just make sure that you run that index.js file in the root. Alright, so go ahead and stop the dev server. PM run server. This is our script. Alright, and we see that we're bringing the data in correctly. Okay, so now what we'll want to do is write this data to a JSON file. I'll call that quotes. And actually, we'll use await here as well. So fs write file sync, right? And then now you'll add in the path to where the file is going to be put in, and then also the name of the file. And since the GitHub gist was calling it demotivation.json, we'll just give it the same name. Alright, and we'll make sure that it knows to use the quotes array that we've gotten here, this object actually. Alright, so now if we run this file, just by running npm run server, it should write and create a new file in this data folder called demotivation.json. Alright, so let's do that. Alright, and there it is, and good. Alright, so now what we want to do is grab, we want to be able to access this JSON file, get the data out of it, and transform it so that we can use it in our GraphQL queries. So to do that, we'll need two things. We'll need a way to make sure that Gatsby can get all of our JSON files that we're going to use that will be kept in our data folder, and source them, or basically provide them for use. So if you go to Gatsby source file system and install that plugin, that'll be a good first step, so go ahead and do that. Alright, and actually we're going to need one more plugin, so that one will be Transformer JSON, or Gatsby Transformer JSON, and this is what will transform your JSON data so that you can access it with a GraphQL query. Alright, so install those, and then we'll need to configure them. So go to your Gatsby config file. Alright, so first, your Gatsby source file system, you can just use this right here. Makes it nice and easy to use. The Gatsby documentation is fantastic. So if you ever have any questions or worries, I'm sure you'll find your answers here. Sorry, I just realized you weren't even looking. But yeah, in the documentation for the Gatsby source file system, yeah, I just copied this right here. Okay, so we can put that in right here. Now, our path, right, we're coming from the data folder in the root. All right, we might as well call the name of this one here data. All right, so we're halfway there now with these plugins. Now with the Gatsby Transformer JSON plugin, you can see there's nothing really special. You just add it to your plugins array. Okay, so now go ahead and run Gatsby develop. Let's make sure we have them there in our package JSON file. Okay, we're good. Alright, so now go to your graphical interface, refresh it, And now you can see you have a JSON query here, all data JSON, right? That means it's going to find all of the JSON files that you've sourced using the Gatsby source file system plugin, and then it's going to make those available for querying. Okay, so let's take a look at that here. All right, so again, and you just hit Shift Space, you'll see all data JSON here. Now, whenever you grab a bunch of files, each file will be like a node, and like that node will be considered as an element in an array. So you'll have this set series of edges here, right? Or the edges is the array of all of your data nodes, basically all of the files that contain the data for each individual data point, or say individual blog post or product that you're going to display. And also you can get the total count. And actually, let's look at that first. Now, since we only have one file, one JSON file that we've sourced, we should only expect to see a total count of 1. Right, and we do. All right, so again, get that array of nodes, which is edges. And then we'll look at each node. In this case, there's only one node because we've got that one file only. And then recall what's available to us is that array of quotes. And then for each quote, you have two properties. You have the actual quote itself, and you have the author. All right, so go ahead and run that. Good, and we get what we expected to get. All right, so we're going to use this query here. So going back to your index.js file, not the one we just created, that just helped us write a file to our data folder. The index.js file we dealt with at the beginning of this video. Alright, so now what we can do is create a query, GraphQL query. But first you'll need to bring that in from Gatsby. Don't forget to add the backticks. And if you ever forget how to write these queries, there's plenty of good documentation at Gatsby. So, for example, you can just go to the page called Querying Data in Pages. And that's what we're doing. We're querying data for our index page component. And you see here they have a couple of different examples. In fact, I do a lot of copying and pasting from the Gatsby documentation. Alright, so we just created a query and we can paste that in. Alright, so we have we have our quotes and our authors of the quotes available to us here. So then in your props, or where you would normally pass in props, just put in the data there. And then if you want to see what that looks like, we can go to our home page. And you can see here you've got your all data JSON object. Right? It has one edge, which means one node. And then it's got that array of quotes. So to use this, it's a little bit nested, so not too bad. Right, so we'll keep that open just for reference. Right. And here we can unquote this again. We're going to have to modify it a little bit. Alright, so before we checked to see if there was a quotes array available, but here to get there we have to go a little bit deeper. Actually, let's do this. Let's say quotes equals data dot, and remember, sometimes I forget myself. Go back to your home page. It's all data JSON. So data dot all data JSON dot edges, right? And we only want the first edge because there only is one, so just do that. And then we'll take that node, and remember it has an array of quotes. Actually, we'll just leave it like that. Okay, that should make everything work, right? Because quotes here takes everything down to the node, and then our first property should be quotes. So if we have quotes dot quotes, yeah, that should work. So if we go to our page, we can see that it does. Right, and again, we're not using fetch in this React component anymore, right? We're bringing in data that exists within our project, right? And we loaded that data in by importing it in another file, right? Using node fetch. Okay, so that's it. We've looked at transforming data from, say, JSON, well, this time it was from JSON, and making it so that we had GraphQL queries available for us to get that data and bring it into our components. In the next video, we're going to not be dealing with JSON files, but Markdown files. And that, if you're watching this now and you haven't looked at the next video, yeah, consider that your homework. You know, if you haven't done anything with Markdown files, which I'm sure you have. If you use GitHub, you at least have created plenty of readmes, I'm sure. But yeah, we'll be using Markdown files. We'll be using something called front matter to keep the metadata for each file, and we'll be loading that in after we transform it from Markdown to to be able to be used in GraphQL queries, and then we'll be injecting that into our pages and making lists and whatnot. So again, as always, thank you for joining me, and I will see you in the next video. Cheers.